Chapter excerpt. The first thing Adrian Vale noticed that Monday morning wasn't the sound of engines. It was silence. The old neighborhood garage usually echoed with the clatter of impact wrenches, impatient customers, and his boss complaining about late deliveries. But as Adrian slid out from beneath a faded yellow taxi, the familiar noise had vanished. Even the radio had gone quiet. He wiped the grease from his forehead with the back of his wrist and frowned. What happened? No one answered. Every mechanic in the garage stood frozen, staring toward the street. Curious, Adrian stepped outside. The entire road had come to a complete stop. A convoy of sleek black luxury sedans stretched farther than he could see. Their polished bodies reflected the morning sun like mirrors. Behind them came armored SUVs, motorcycle escorts, and two helicopters circling slowly overhead. News vans pushed through the growing crowd. Reporters adjusted microphones. People climbed onto parked cars, desperate to record whatever was happening. An elderly customer whispered beside Adrian, "Is the Prime Minister coming?" Another man shook his head. "No." His voice trembled. "That's the Ashcroft family crest." A wave of whispers spread through the crowd. The Ashcroft? The richest family in the country? What are they doing in this neighborhood? Adrian glanced back toward the half-repaired taxi still sitting on the lift. They've got the wrong address. He turned as if to return to work. The lead limousine door opened. A man in his late 70s stepped onto the pavement. Despite his age, he stood perfectly straight. His tailored charcoal suit carried no flashy logos, yet every movement radiated quiet authority. The dozens of executives surrounding him instinctively remained half a step behind. Without acknowledging the reporters, without greeting the politicians rushing forward, without even looking at the cameras, Leon Ashcroft walked directly toward the small neighborhood garage. The crowd parted in silence. One of Adrian's co-workers whispered nervously, "Boss, I think he's coming here." The garage owner laughed awkwardly. "Don't be ridiculous." Leon never slowed. He crossed the cracked concrete driveway and entered the oil-stained workshop as though it were the grand lobby of his own headquarters. His polished shoes stopped only a few feet from Adrian. The two men simply looked at one another. Leon studied the young mechanic's grease-stained shirt, worn work gloves, and tired eyes. Then, something no one expected happened. The wealthiest man in the country smiled. A small, warm, almost shy smile. As though, he said quietly, "There you are." Adrian blinked. "I'm sorry. Have we met?" A faint chuckle escaped the old billionaire. "You know, but I've been waiting a very long time to say those words." The reporters pushed closer. Every camera focused on the pair. Confusion spread across the faces of the executives standing behind Leon. Even they seemed unsure of what would happen next. Leon slowly turned toward the sea of cameras. His voice remained calm, but steady, impossible to ignore. "I would like everyone present, and everyone watching this broadcast, to witness today's announcement." The entire street fell silent. Then the old man spoke the sentence that would dominate every news channel in the country before the hour was over. Effective immediately, the Ashcroft family officially declares Adrian Vale. He looked directly at Adrian, our future son-in-law. The crowd erupted. People gasped. Reporters shouted questions over one another. Phones shot into the air. Someone dropped a camera. Across the city, the announcement began spreading through live broadcasts and social media faster than anyone could track. Adrian didn't react. He looked from Leon into the cameras, at the dozens of luxury vehicles filling the street. Then with complete sincerity, he asked the only question on his mind. Sir, who are you?" Leon stared at him for a long second. Then he smiled again. Not because Adrian had embarrassed him, but because Adrian had just confirmed something Leon had hoped for all these years. The young man standing before him truly had no idea who the Ashcroft family was. Leon nodded once. "Oh, good. That means you haven't changed." The moment the announcement ended, the quiet street exploded into chaos. Microphones surged forward. Reporters shouted over one another. "Mr. Adrian, did you know about this? When is the wedding? Have you been secretly dating Miss Ashcroft? What does it feel like becoming part of the richest family in the country?" Camera flashes lit up the garage like lightning. People climbed onto nearby cars just to get a better view. Someone started a live stream. Within minutes, the clip had spread across every major social media platform. Millions were already watching. Yet standing at the center of the storm, Adrian remained completely still. His eyes shifted from the reporters to the long line of luxury vehicles, then back toward the old taxi sitting on the lift inside the garage. He scratched the back of his neck. "Oh, excuse me." The reporters paused. Instead of answering a single question, Adrian quietly walked past the billionaire, past the cameras, past the bodyguards, straight back into the garage. For a second, nobody moved. Even the reporters looked confused. What is he doing? Inside the garage, Adrian grabbed a wrench from his toolbox and slid back beneath the taxi. The elderly taxi driver peeked inside nervously. "Young man, I think your life just changed." Adrian's voice echoed from beneath the vehicle. "Oh, maybe." A bolt loosened with a metallic click. "But your brakes still need fixing." The old man stared at him in disbelief. Outside, complete silence. One of the Ashcroft executives leaned toward Leon. "Chairman, should we stop him?" Leon didn't even look away from Adrian. "You know, let him finish." The executive blinked. "Yes, sir." Leon smiled faintly. "If he abandoned his responsibility because of money, then I would have come to the wrong person." The words left every executive speechless. Back inside the garage, Adrian continued working as though nothing extraordinary had happened. His boss, Mr. Harris, hurried over, nearly tripping over an air hose. "Adrian, what are you doing?" Adrian slid out from beneath the taxi. "I'm working." Mr. Harris pointed frantically toward the street. "The richest family in the country is waiting for you." "As I know, they just announced you're marrying their heiress." "I heard, and you're fixing brakes." Adrian looked at the old taxi driver. "He needs his car to pick up his granddaughter from school. If I leave now, he'll have to wait." The old driver lowered his head, embarrassed. "You don't have to worry about me." Adrian smiled politely. "I already promised I'd finish." The old man couldn't say another word. Near the garage entrance, several Ashcroft bodyguards exchanged uncertain glances. None of them had ever witnessed someone ignore unlimited wealth to keep a promise to a stranger. Leon quietly watched the scene unfold. For just a moment, his eyes softened. "So, it wasn't luck," he murmured to himself. "He really did grow into this kind of man." Meanwhile, standing several steps behind the chairman, a younger man folded his arms. His tailored navy suit contrasted sharply with Adrian's grease-stained work clothes. His expression carried neither curiosity nor admiration, only irritation. This was Damien Ashcroft, the grandson everyone expected to inherit the Ashcroft empire. He stepped closer to Leon and lowered his voice. "Grandfather." Leon didn't answer. Damien continued. "You've embarrassed the entire family." Still silent, Damien glanced toward Adrian. "He's a mechanic. He doesn't know business. He doesn't know our world. He doesn't belong anywhere near Serafina." Finally, Leon turned his head. His calm gaze settled on Damien. "You believe leadership comes from wealth." Damien remained silent. Leon continued. "I used to believe that, too." Then he looked back toward Adrian. The young mechanic had just finished tightening the final bolt. He carefully lowered the taxi from the lift before wiping his hands with an old towel. Nothing dramatic. Nothing impressive. Just someone quietly finishing what he started. Leon spoke almost to himself. "Watch carefully." Damien frowned. "Watch what?" A small smile appeared on the old billionaire's face. "The reason is every person in this family will one day depend on him." Damien looked at Adrian again. This time not with confusion. With disbelief. There was no way. Not him. Not an ordinary mechanic. Not someone who cared more about repairing an old taxi than joining the richest family in the country. As Adrian handed the taxi keys back to the grateful driver, none of them noticed the old man's trembling hands or the tears gathering in his eyes. Because the first person Adrian would unknowingly change had just entered the story. The old taxi slowly pulled away from the garage. The elderly driver rolled down his window one last time. He looked at Adrian with eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, son." Adrian smiled. "Drive carefully." The taxi disappeared around the corner. Only then did Adrian turn back toward the hundreds of people still standing outside his workplace. Nothing had changed. The reporters were still broadcasting live. Police continued holding back the growing crowd. The convoy of luxury vehicles still stretched across the entire street. Dozens of executives waited in absolute silence as if they were waiting for a king to make the next move. But instead, Adrian walked over to a small metal sink beside the garage wall and began washing the grease from his hands. One of the reporters couldn't help herself. She pushed past the security line. "Mr. Adrian." He looked up politely. "Oh, yes. You've just been announced as the future son-in-law of the richest family in the country. Why are you acting like this is normal?" Adrian looked down at his hands. The black engine oil slowly disappeared beneath the running water. Then he answered honestly, "Because I still don't understand what's happening." The sincerity in his voice caught everyone off guard. There was no excitement, no greed, no fake humility. He genuinely had no idea why any of this was happening. Leon watched quietly. Another small smile crossed his face. "He hasn't changed," he whispered. One of the executives standing nearby frowned. "Is there anything wrong?" Leon shook his head. "Nothing." Just then, a sharp gust of wind swept across the street. Loose newspapers flew into the air. Dust spun across the pavement. Several reporters instinctively grabbed their microphones. The sound grew louder. Zum. 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 Everyone looked toward the sky. A matte black helicopter descended slowly above a nearby empty parking lot. The crowd erupted again. "It's her. The Ice Queen. Miss Ashcroft is here." Phones rose into the air like a forest of glowing screens. The helicopter landed with perfect precision. Its blades continued spinning as the side door opened. A pair of black heels touched the pavement. Then she stepped out. Serafina Ashcroft, dressed in a tailored ivory suit beneath a long charcoal overcoat, she moved with effortless confidence. Her expression was unreadable. Calm, elegant, almost cold enough to freeze the noise around her. The executives immediately lowered their heads. "Good morning, Ms. Ashcroft." She acknowledged no one. Not the cameras, not the reporters, not even her own executives. She walked straight toward the garage. Every step echoed across the suddenly silent street. The crowd instinctively parted before her. Even the reporters stopped shouting. No one wanted to interrupt the woman who controlled companies worth hundreds of billions. Meanwhile, Adrian noticed everyone staring behind him. He turned. Their eyes met for the first time. Neither of them spoke. Several long seconds passed. The cameras captured every moment. Millions watched through their phones. Waiting, expecting romance, expecting tears, expecting a dramatic embrace. But instead, Serafina quietly studied him. Grease stains on his shirt, small cuts across his knuckles, worn work boots, the tired eyes of someone who worked with his hands every day. Nothing matched the image she had imagined for years. And yet, everything somehow felt right. Adrian broke the silence first. He glanced at the helicopter, then at the convoy, then back at her. "Are all these people here because of me?" Serafina gave a single nod. "Oh, yes." Adrian looked around the neighborhood. Several nearby shops had closed because of the crowd. Children couldn't cross the street. Traffic had completely stopped. He let out a quiet sigh. "Well, I think you scared half the neighborhood." Silence. Several executives froze. One reporter accidentally lowered her microphone. Damien looked horrified. Absolutely nobody had ever spoken to Serafina Ashcroft like that. Not investors. Not politicians. Not foreign presidents. Everyone expected her expression to harden. But instead the smallest change appeared at the corner of her lips. Not a smile. Almost one. Gone before anyone could be certain they had seen it. Only Leon noticed. His eyes widened ever so slightly. As though he thought, oh, even she softened. For years Serafina had mastered every expression required to lead an empire. Confidence. Authority. Control. But in that single moment a mechanic had done what the entire country believed impossible. He had made the Ice Queen almost smile. Adrian, completely unaware of what had just happened, looked toward his boss. "Mr. Harris." The older man jumped. "Why, yes. Can I take my lunch break now?" Mr. Harris stared at him. Then at the billionaire family. Then back at Adrian. "I don't think today is a normal workday anymore." A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. Even several bodyguards struggled to hide faint smiles. For the first time since arriving, the suffocating atmosphere surrounding the Ashcroft family became just a little lighter. Leon quietly looked toward Serafina. She was still watching Adrian. Not with curiosity, not with surprise, but with an expression he hadn't seen since she was a little girl. Hope. And for the first time in many years, Leon believed he hadn't made a mistake. The crowd outside the garage had finally begun to thin. Reporters continued broadcasting from across the street. Police redirected traffic around the endless line of black luxury vehicles. Inside the garage, Adrian quietly packed his tools into a worn metal toolbox. Mr. Harris watched him from the office doorway. Adrian looked up. "You really don't know who those people are?" Adrian shook his head. "I've heard the name. That's about it." Mr. Harris laughed in disbelief. "You've just been asked to marry the richest woman in the country. And you don't even know who she is." Adrian shrugged. "I've been busy fixing engines." Before Mr. Harris could answer, a soft knock echoed through the garage. Leon Ashcroft had entered alone. No bodyguards, no executives, no cameras, just the old man. He looked around the workshop with quiet appreciation. "I've always liked places like this." Adrian smiled politely. "They're usually a lot louder." Leon nodded. "They are." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Leon broke the silence. "I owe you an apology." Adrian frowned. "For what?" "I turned your life upside down today." Adrian looked toward the crowded street outside. "You definitely surprised me." A faint chuckle escaped the old billionaire. "I'm afraid surprises are becoming a habit." Then his expression grew serious. "I won't ask you to accept today's announcement. I won't ask you to trust me. I won't even ask you to believe me." He paused. "I only have one request." Adrian waited. "Give me 1 hour." 1 hour. Leon nodded. "Come to Ashcroft headquarters. If after 1 hour you decide you never want to see us again, I will personally announce to the country that today's engagement is cancelled." Silence. Adrian studied the old man's face. There was no pressure, no manipulation, only sincerity. "You'd really do that?" "I give you my word." Adrian glanced toward Mr. Harris. The older mechanic simply shrugged. "I've never trusted billionaires, but I trust old men who apologize." Adrian couldn't help smiling. He turned back to Leon. "All right. 1 hour." Relief flickered across Leon's face. "Thank you." 20 minutes later, the convoy finally began moving. Adrian sat alone inside the last sedan. He watched the familiar streets disappear behind him. Small repair shops, corner cafes, old apartment buildings, everything slowly gave way to towering glass skyscrapers. The city seemed to transform with every passing kilometer. Meanwhile, inside the lead limousine, Damien looked toward Leon. "I still don't understand." Leon closed the folder resting on his lap. "You don't have to. Grandfather, you've risked the reputation of the entire Ashcroft family." "For him? Why?" Leon remained silent. Damien leaned forward. "Is he a hidden genius? A secret heir? A political connection?" Damien frowned. "Then what makes him so important?" Leon looked out the window. After several seconds, he answered. "When you spend 78 years building an empire, you eventually learn something." Damien waited. "The rarest people in this world are not the smartest, nor the richest. They're the ones who quietly change every room they enter." Damien scoffed. "That's impossible." Leon smiled. "I thought so, too. Until I met Adrian." The convoy entered the financial district. Employees walking along the sidewalks froze. Phones immediately appeared. People pointed toward the Ashcroft vehicles. "They're back. Who's in the last car? Is that really him?" Inside the sedan, Adrian noticed none of it. Instead, he watched an elderly street cleaner struggling to push an overloaded cart across the road. The traffic light turned green. Cars began moving. Without thinking, Adrian reached for the door handle. The chauffeur immediately glanced into the mirror. "Sir, could we stop for a moment?" The chauffeur hesitated. The convoy never stopped unexpectedly. But after a brief pause, he pulled over. Adrian stepped out, walked over to the old street cleaner, and without saying a word, helped push the heavy cart safely across the intersection. The entire financial district watched in confusion. When he returned, he simply thanked the chauffeur. "Sorry, I didn't want him getting hurt." The chauffeur nodded silently. He had expected praise. When instead, Adrian acted as though nothing unusual had happened. Far ahead, Leon received a short message on his phone from the chauffeur. He got out to help a stranger. Leon smiled, not because Adrian had helped, but because he hadn't looked around first to see who was watching. He never did. Leon quietly whispered to himself, "Oh, good. It wasn't an act." The convoy continued toward Ashcroft headquarters. None of them realized, within the next hour, everything the Ashcroft family believed about leadership would begin to change. The Ashcroft headquarters tower dominated the city's skyline. A monument of glass and steel, 48 floors, more than 12,000 employees. Every decision made inside those walls could shift entire markets. As Adrian stepped out of the sedan, he looked up at the building. "That's tall." The chauffeur smiled. "It has 48 floors." Adrian let out a low whistle. "I'd hate to clean the windows." The chauffeur laughed before quickly catching himself. He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed while on duty. Inside the lobby, everything moved with military precision. Executives hurried between elevators. Assistants carried stacks of documents. Security teams spoke through earpieces. The atmosphere felt heavy. Not because people were working, because everyone looked afraid. The moment Leon entered, every employee stopped. "Good afternoon, Chairman." Leon acknowledged them with a nod. Adrian followed quietly behind, observing everything. Not the marble floors, not the expensive artwork, the people. One receptionist was nervously rubbing her thumb against a pen. A security guard kept checking the executive elevator instead of the entrance. Two assistants whispered while pretending to organize files. Everyone looked tense. "Busy day?" Adrian asked the receptionist. She forced a smile. "You could say that." Before she could continue, an executive interrupted. "Chairman, the board is waiting." Minutes later, the boardroom doors opened. More than 30 executives were already seated. Some argued. Others stared anxiously at financial reports. 3 large screens displayed graphs filled with red numbers. The atmosphere was suffocating. Damien stood at the center of the room. "The Sterling acquisition is collapsing. Our legal team says we have less than 2 hours. If this deal fails, we lose nearly $4 billion. Murmurs spread across the room. Lawyers blamed finance. Finance blamed risk management. Risk management blamed legal. Everyone had an explanation. No one had a solution. Only then did they notice Adrian standing beside Leon. Silence. One executive frowned. Who is he?" Another answered quietly, "The mechanic." Several exchanged confused looks. "This isn't the time." Damien folded his arms. "Well, I agree." He looked directly at Adrian. "I assume you've never attended a board meeting before." Adrian shook his head. Damien smiled. "Then today will be educational." A few executives chuckled. Leon ignored the remark. "Continue." For the next 20 minutes, the board dissected contracts, reviewed projections, questioned advisors. Every explanation sounded more complicated than the last. Adrian remained silent. Not because he was intimidated, because he was listening. Not to the executives, to the room. Then, he noticed something. Near the far end of the table sat a young woman in her 20s. A junior financial analyst. Her laptop was open. Her hand had been half-raised 3 separate times. Each time, someone spoke over her. The 4th time, she lowered it before anyone noticed. Except Adrian. He leaned slightly toward Leon. "May I ask a question?" Leon nodded. Adrian looked across the room. "Excuse me." Every conversation stopped. He smiled politely at the young analyst. "I think you've been trying to say something." The room turned toward her. Her eyes widened. She looked at Damien, then at the other executives. "It's probably nothing." One senior executive sighed impatiently. "We don't have time for speculation." Adrian answered gently, "Maybe, but you've been trying to speak for the last 20 minutes. If it wasn't important, you would have stopped trying." The room became quiet. Leon spoke for the first time since entering. "Go ahead." The young analyst swallowed nervously. She connected her laptop to the main screen. "I was reviewing the acquisition timeline." She opened an attachment no one else had referenced. "I noticed these approval dates." Damien frowned. "We've already reviewed those." She shook her head. "No, you reviewed the final contract." "I checked the revision history." She enlarged one section. A single amendment appeared, added only 48 hours earlier, hidden among hundreds of routine edits. The room leaned forward. The legal director suddenly stood. Wait. He walked closer to the screen. His face slowly lost color. This clause was never in the version we approved. Silence. The analyst nodded. It transfers every unresolved environmental liability to Ashcroft after the acquisition. One executive grabbed the contract. Another opened the digital archive. Within seconds, the room erupted. Who approved this? Where did this come from? This would cost us billions. Lawyers rushed toward the screen. Phones rang. Assistants hurried out of the room. Damien stood frozen. For the first time that day, nobody was looking at him. They were looking at the young analyst. Leon quietly turned toward Adrian. You already knew she had the answer. Adrian blinked. I just noticed that everyone kept interrupting the only person who looked like she'd actually found something. Leon smiled. Not because Adrian had solved the crisis, because he hadn't. He had simply noticed the voice nobody else had bothered to hear. Across the room, Serafina had remained silent from the beginning. Now, for the first time, she looked at Adrian differently. Not with curiosity, with understanding. The reports Leon had shown her over the years. The stories she had quietly dismissed as exaggerations, they weren't exaggerations at all. He wasn't changing the problem. He was changing the people around it. And somehow, that was proving even more powerful. The boardroom was no longer filled with arguments. Now, it was filled with movement. Lawyers rushed in and out carrying revised contracts. The legal department launched an internal investigation. The acquisition team immediately suspended the signing ceremony. Phones rang non-stop. For the first time that day, the Ashcroft Group wasn't reacting to the crisis. It was controlling it. The young analyst still stood beside the presentation screen, unable to believe what had just happened. A senior executive walked over. Miss Chen. She looked up nervously. Yes, sir. He extended his hand. Thank you. Her eyes widened. In 3 years at Ashcroft, no executive had ever thanked her. Across the room, Adrian quietly watched the exchange. A faint smile crossed his face. Then he turned to leave. Leon noticed. Where are you going? Adrian looked at the wall clock. My hour is almost over. Several executives stopped what they were doing. Had they heard correctly? The future son-in-law of the Ashcroft family was leaving because his promised hour had ended. Leon glanced at the clock. Exactly 60 minutes. Not 59. Not 61. Exactly 1 hour. A warm smile appeared on the old man's face. You keep your promises. And even to yourself. Adrian shrugged. A promise is still a promise. Leon nodded slowly. I won't stop you. The room fell silent. Even Damien looked surprised. He had expected his grandfather to insist. Instead, Leon honored Adrian's decision without hesitation. As Adrian reached the boardroom door, the young analyst spoke. Mr. Adrian. He turned. She bowed deeply. Thank you. Adrian looked confused. I didn't do anything. Oh, you did. If you hadn't noticed me, I would have stayed silent. Adrian smiled gently. I think you already knew the answer. You just needed someone to notice. The young analyst stood frozen. For years, she had believed confidence was something people were born with. Yet one stranger had changed that belief in a single conversation. Adrian gave a small wave. Good luck. Then he left. The heavy boardroom doors closed behind him. That evening, Ashcroft headquarters had finally grown quiet. Most employees had gone home. Only a handful of lights remained on. High above the city, Leon sat alone in his private office. A cup of untouched tea rested on his desk. He looked out across the skyline. A soft knock came at the door. Come in. Damien entered. He didn't look angry anymore. Only confused. I've been thinking. Leon remained silent. I still don't understand. He didn't solve the acquisition. He didn't negotiate. He didn't expose the fraud. Then why are you smiling? Leon slowly stood. He walked toward a tall wooden cabinet built into the wall. Unlike the others, this cabinet required both a key and a fingerprint. Damien frowned. He had never seen his grandfather open it. Leon unlocked the cabinet. Inside, there was only one object. A thick black file. No company logo. No security markings. Just 2 words embossed in silver, Adrian Vale. Damien's expression changed. What is that? Leon placed the file on his desk. His hand rested gently on the cover. I started this 20 years ago. Damien stared. 20 years? Leon nodded. Long before today's announcement. He slowly opened the first page. It wasn't a financial report. It wasn't a background investigation. It wasn't a family record. Instead, each page contained a date, a location, and a simple observation. Age 8, comforted another child after a playground fight. Age 11, teacher postponed resignation after speaking with him. Age 15, resolved dispute between 2 mechanics without either realizing he had done it. Age 19, customer returned 3 months later simply to say thank you. Age 22, neighborhood garage productivity increased after his arrival. Hundreds of pages, hundreds of observations, none mentioned wealth, none mentioned talent, only one pattern. Everywhere Adrian went, people changed. Damien slowly looked up. You have been watching him his entire life. Leon closed the file. We never interfered. We only observed. Damien's voice dropped. Why? Leon walked toward the window. The city lights reflected in the glass. When I was younger, I believed great leaders created successful companies. He smiled faintly. I was wrong. He turned back toward Damien. Great people create better people. And better people change the world. Damien looked once more at the file, then back at his grandfather. So, that's why you announced the engagement. Leon was quiet for several seconds. Then, he gave an answer that made Damien's heart skip. The engagement was never the reason. It was the only way to bring Adrian into this building. Silence. Damien could barely process what he had heard. Leon placed his hand on the file one final time. Then he spoke the words that would change everything. We don't need Adrian because he belongs to the Ashcroft family. He looked directly at Damien. We need Adrian. And because one day the Ashcroft family will rely entirely on him.